Hello, everyone at KCBC, Kansas City Bitcoin and Cryptocurrency. If you haven't checked us out on the web, we are thekcbc.com, and on Facebook, we are Kansas City Bitcoin and Cryptocurrency Club. This episode, this podcast is a really special one, and any of you out there that are artists, I want to really describe what it is that makes up an artist's life. Their work is their life, vice versa. Their life is their work. And our guest on the podcast today is Brian McGuire, AKA Lefthouse. He is a filmmaker, a musician, he is an artist, and I think that one of the things that makes his art is his, again, like I said, experiences in life. So this is really an in-depth artist profile on Brian McGuire, and we're, in this episode, going to hear from Brian and his early life on into about his teenage years. So this is going to be a part one of a part 4 or 5 segment that we do on Brian McGuire, and it's really important. We are going to get into some cryptocurrencies, NFT. He is an artist in the non-fungible token market, so search for him on the web at atomicwallet.io. You can search for him by the username Lefthouse. He's got a lot of great work up there. So let's welcome Brian McGuire. Welcome, everybody, to the Kansas City Bitcoin Cryptocurrency podcast for, I believe this is still February. Hopefully this is coming out in February. And we have my guest today for this podcast is Brian McGuire, also known as Lefthouse. He's an artist. He's a music, he records music. He is in the world of DAPPs and crypto, most specifically known for his Upland activity, where he runs the Upland Action news as a super fan or as a mega fan. And we're going to talk to him today, but welcome, Brian McGuire, Lefthouse.
Well, thank you very much. Hey, right on. Craft, I love it. That's very nice. Thank you for that.
All right. So, Brian, welcome to the show. And I have so many questions to ask you. Thank you for doing this. I want to start off by when I first found out you existed was through Upland, and it is a DAPP. It's a decentralized application game. It runs on the EOS blockchain, and it's a real estate game, basically, is what it boils down to. But it also has elements of NFT, non-fungible tokens, and some other aspects to the game that is starting to come to fruition. And when I first started getting into the game, I did some searching around, and I found the Upland Action, daily news, and I started kind of following what you did. But what I know of you so far is Texas. I know that you spent or are around. I'm a native Texan, so I'm from Texas as well. But I don't know much up until the part of where your first film that you did, which was Window Licker, was that, or Paper Chase? The Paper Chase may have been the first film.
Oh man, Paper Chase is from like a deep cut, like that's from the vault.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a short film that was, yeah.
So
but
tell
yeah,
us about.
we can.
Tell us who you are, where you came from, what planet you came from, how you got to Earth, and then tell us from there.
Yeah, all right. Well, it all started in Chicago, Illinois. That's where I was born. And I'm the second oldest of 7 brothers and sisters. Wow. My pops married 4 times. And, just like one after the next to the next, and just kept having babies. He's a career parent, like he's had a child in his house for over 40 years, And so I have like brothers that are like kids, well, they're like in college and stuff, or getting out of college now. But there was a time when they were kids and I was like a man, and I was like, this is weird. It's like most of my brothers and sisters I knew. Like
you're one of the oldest?
I'm the second oldest, yeah. And like so I'm the youngest of the first mother, you know what I mean? My mom had Luke and Brian, then my dad married Heidi, had Molly and Katie, then Beth, and then he had Emmett, who's my brother, Lefthouse Crypto. You'll see him around and stuff. Okay. He's in Upland as well. He joins me on the show sometimes. He's like part of everything I do. Like,
what is his gamer name? What is Emmett's gamer name?
Emmett McGuire. He didn't realize that he was going to be stuck with his name, so he didn't come up with something that clever.
We'll get to that later about names in the game, but go ahead, continue on.
Yeah. So strangely, I did some time in Peoria, Illinois as a young man after my mother and father divorced, and we went to a carnival. And my mom, like, she fell in love with the guy that was running the spin art booth, you know, like the record players that go fast and you drop
Yes.
paint, and it's so, and he was a con artist. And so she took him home that night. And then a week later they got married, and he promised her the world, and ended up in Austin, Texas. Like, they got in a fight. He stole her car. He drove down to Austin, got busted for drugs. So my mom had to fly down to get him out of jail. So then, like, and my mom and dad were in this huge, crazy custody battle whole time. So, you know, eventually, like, me and my brother ended up on the streets with my mom in Texas, and my dad's like hired private investigators and all this stuff. And I was like kidnapped by my dad, went from like living on the streets to like a big 3-story like house, tennis court and maid, private school, like overnight when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So I was back in Chicago. My mom stayed in Texas, like cleaned herself up, like got off the drugs, and started becoming like a drug and alcohol counselor. She was a musician herself, and very creative person. She still is. She's an actor now as well. But so she stayed in Austin. After she cleaned up, I moved back in 7th grade. And it was like, I was like a little skateboard punk at the time, you know, like my older brother was into like cool punk rock music and stuff. So like I was exposed to really cool things when I was really young. And then when I got to Austin, like the one like rule that my father made was like, if you're going to move back with your mom, you got to go to a Catholic school. So, you know, I was like going to this little tiny school, and I like, by the time I showed up there, my mother had like made the mistake of telling the Texas debutante mothers and like the principal, like our backstory a little bit. So I was like public enemy number one, like going into the school, but I loved it though. You know, I was like this little like rebel kid, you know, and I was like a little skater kid and stuff. So I kind of like became like a popular, cool, like rebel punk kid for 2 years. And then I went to the big high school.
So what size was the school that you came from? Was it like how many, like 300 in the entire school or more?
Okay, it was like kindergarten to 8th grade, right? And there was maybe like, I don't know, 500 students in the whole school,
Okay.
right? You know, I got to go to a public school for high school, and it was like, I don't know, like 2,500 kids or something. It was just like a lot, you know, it's a big school. This was in Austin.
Oh, Austin, Texas.
And so, yeah. And so I was like, kind of, I didn't do drugs. I was really straight edge because of everything I went through as a, you know, and saw as a kid with my parents and stuff. So I was like really against that stuff in high school. So the other skater kids were all like, you know, like way punk. And I was like getting into the hip hop music at this point. So I was like alone. I didn't have any friends. And then like there was this black girl that I fell in love with. And like, she was like super beautiful, very popular girl. And she like really immediately like was like recognized that I had feelings for her. And she was like, you know, we can't do this. You know, this is impossible. And I was like, what do you mean? Why? She's like, well, because you'll die. You know, I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of started to see what she was talking about because everybody liked her a lot. If the white boy would have gotten with it, it would have been trouble, you know? And she says to me, she gives me the classic line, like, but you know, we can be friends. And I'm like, this is the first time I'm hearing this in my life. Like, oh, but I've heard it on the TV. I'm like, okay, I get it. We can be friends. But then like the next day, like I'm sitting there and she walks up to me with like 5 of her best friends and introduces me to all of them. And it was like, all of a sudden now I had friends, you know, and within like 6 months though, or even less, like the principals were now coming up to me going like, who are you hanging out with? You know, or whatever. And like, and I'm like, whoa, like, and my mother was like an activist. She almost married a black man when I was a kid, like after my dad and her divorced and stuff, which pissed my dad off too, which was crazy. But then like, you know, so like I had it in me once I saw that like from these old crusty white people, I was like, oh, really? You don't like me hanging out with black people? Like, so I started wearing like Africa medallions to school and stuff. And like I had, you know, my friends were all black, like all through high school and stuff. And it was just like a very different experience than most people have in Texas and that I was expecting to have when I went to school. But it was awesome though, because, you know, like after high school and then I like, you know, I was skateboarding through all this. So like, you know, people were just judging me left and right. Cause like after high school, then all of my friends were like drag queens and club kids. And like, I didn't have any straight friends. So then everybody in Texas just thought I was gay, but I'm like, no, they're just my friends, you know? So I've always like dabbled. I've always been like, sort of like the minority in a minority group. Like even when I moved to California, like I found myself like DJing at like an all Asian club, you know, I'm like one of the only white people there. It just keeps happening. And like, I've had all of these crazy life experiences at this point, you know, I've seen weirdness. I've seen lots of pain and like, you know, just I've been through it all at this point, but I don't know what the hell I want to do with my life. You know, like at this point, I'm just clueless. And I felt like at this point, everything was set up for you. After, you know, 8th grade, you go to high school and blah, blah, blah. They just set it up for you, you know? And then it was like wide open. So I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And a couple of my friends were in acting class and they invited me to go to the class. There was a substitute teacher. So the teacher asked me if I wanted to get up and do a scene or whatever. And I was like scared out of my mind, you know, but I did it and I got up and it was like every hair stood up on my body. And it was like for a second, like everything that had ever happened in my life, from like this experience to that experience to hanging out with these people and that people and stuff, all now made sense. And it was like, oh, I'm supposed to tell stories, like, and like I thought in the beginning, it was like I'm supposed to tell stories by being an actor. But at the same time too, it was like I then wanted to start to learn everything. I started to learn how to read and write and like paint and like just started to learn everything I could. I didn't read any. I read up to the number of 10 books. By the time I graduated high school, I'd only read 10 books in my life.
That surprised
like,
me. That surprised me when you said that. You said it on the show earlier today. You said you didn't read when you're talking about the Christie's thing. That surprised me because I'm going to ask you later who did all of your screenplay or your writing for the films and the shorts that you've done. That's going to be a question, but if you don't like to do that, that takes a lot of reading and writing to be able to do that. Continue on. So you didn't read it.
Well, it is me that does the writing and stuff. Like I you know, it's like if once I have the story, I can do it. I'm dyslexic too. So it's like, that's what I used as an excuse early on. Like once they said I was dyslexic, then it was like, well, I'm dyslexic, so I don't have to do that, you know, and like found back doors through things. But, you know, like there are some challenges to it, but I find them to be like, I think they kind of are creative boosters in a way too. Like some of the things that happened with my dyslexia, I think kind of lent to the art. But you know, when it comes to it, you know, I can read and I can write, you know, but it's just like sometimes it's harder than others. Writing's easier. I mean, I spell terribly, but you know, the story's there, and then you know, there's spell check, and then still like somebody else has to like do another spell grammar pass from that point. Yeah. So, but yeah, so like, you know, then, you know, going from there, then I was like, all right, so I'm going to be an actor. That's what I want to do. I moved to California.
What year is it?
Almost,
what year?
I moved to California in 99.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right.
I was there in 2000, from 2000 to 2004.
Yeah.
Where in California?
Los Angeles, into like Los Feliz was the neighborhood that I found myself in for the first like decade that I was in town. And you know, I came out to be an actor, was dedicated, I was ready for it, and quit almost like right away. 6 months in, I like just I got a part in a commercial. Like a buddy of mine got sick and couldn't go to his audition, so he like gave me a spot. I booked it. I got an agent, and I had like somebody had Gus Van Sant's Rolodex. So I called Gus Van Sant like every week for about, I don't know, like 2 months. And I said the same thing every time. I'm like, hey, Gus, this is Brian McGuire. I'm trying to get in touch with Larry Clark because I heard he's looking for a screenplay about skateboarding. And, you know, he's the guy that made Kids, right?
Right.
So I just left this message, and it was like, it became like a joke where it's like, well, it's time to call Gus, you know? And so I'd leave the message, and then Larry Clark called me back, and he's like, Brian, you know, this is Larry Clark or whatever. I sent him the script, and he was like, I want to make your movie. So all of this stuff like happened like right when I got to Los Angeles. I just got to town. I'm like, man, this is really going great. Then the commercial comes out. I get cut out of it. I realize like my agent thing is like not actually in Los Angeles. It's like way the fuck down the road. Like they're a scam sort of thing. And Larry Clark calls me and says, I got money for this other project. Like I can't make your movie. I'm out. So like this all happened in 1 week. And in the same week, like I had a friend that was like, hey, I'm about to throw a rave. And I'm like, cool, can I DJ at it? And she's like, are you ready? And I said, yeah, sure. And I wasn't. I just started playing. But then I just like, you know, treated it like a job and like dedicated up until like the time that I was supposed to play at this party. I did like 12 hours a day, just like figuring it out. And I was still terrible. But the cool thing is that I had so many friends like in that rave community when I first got here. That's like kind of where I found myself, that I had like 60 like of my friends like going nuts, like screaming, while like the main DJ was like in the other room, like with not that many people in it, because like all the energy was in here, even though it was terrible. And so then like, you know, some like there was like a big club that happened to be like the promoters for some club was there, and they asked me to be a resident at their club on Wednesday nights in Hollywood. So I basically like learned, I got paid to learn and learned how to DJ at the same time, and like had about a 10-year DJ career.
What was your DJ name?
DJ Brian McGuire. Simple. I had a DJ name. I did. I had a DJ name, and I was like, you know, I sent it in to the promoter for the first party I was going to play, and it was going to be DJ My, M-Y, DJ My. And the promoter goes,
no.
She goes, nope, that's a dumb name. Nope, you're Brian McGuire. And I'm like, all right. So I just went with that. I didn't want to like have to introduce myself as DJ Blaze or something, like DJ Fire Stick or whatever. You know,
I love like, DJ Maya. I love.
Yeah, I just said, you know, I don't know, it's a bad name, but maybe I'll revise it one day. But so yeah, so then I kind of like always knew though, like I'm DJing, I'm really enjoying this like techno music, which was like kind of new for me because my roots were more like punk and sloppy music, but it was really kind of refreshing to find myself in like something that was about timing and precision. But it was always the goal to like, how do I like make this kind of music sloppy? And so like years later, I feel like I finally got there. Once I started doing like live bands and stuff, like singing and playing guitar. And like, I had a band for like 7 years. Gene Wilder was the name of the band.
Oh my God. And, great name. Great name.
It was a lot of fun. It was just like a bunch of like actors and musicians. Like I had a lot of really, really good country musicians, like guys that were like out touring and like playing on big records and stuff like that ended up joining Gene Wilder. At one point, it was like a 12-person band and all these like great musicians, but they were all playing like instruments that weren't their number one instrument. They were playing weird instruments like washboards and like steel slide guitars, and just made it. And no, but we never rehearsed. So these guys, we would be just playing live at the bar or whatever, and they would just figure it out and make the song sound better than I would ever imagine. Sometimes they were sloppy as hell, but that was part of the fun of it, is like, where is it going? You
know, Stuart Copeland does that from the Police, the drummer. Yeah. He has a room with a bunch of music instruments, and people go over there and they just jam, and he just kicks on the mics and they go for it.
So cool.
You know, the country scene, Lucinda Williams, she's near and dear to my heart. So in that country thing about country music, but let's go back really quickly, put a pin in that where you are in your story. And I want to go back to the punk roots. Are we talking punk rock like Ramones and Sex Pistols? Are we going forward with DRI and like Black Flag? Like, where are your punk roots, man?
Right.
How punk rock are you, man?
This is really cool, because like this, what you had just said there, I wanted to segue into that. And then I was like, damn, he's like not let me, but now you just let me come right back to it. The Police. Synchronicity Police. That was the first concert I ever saw was the Police on Synchronicity, with English Beat opening for them. And so the first album I ever bought, like single vinyl, was a single of Doors, Light My Fire. You know, my mother was a musician. She was like a singer-songwriter. She loved Bob Dylan. She put me to bed to either Pink Floyd, Kraftwerk, or Cliff Richards.
Wow.
Those are the three weird things that I went to bed to as like a kid. Wow. And my grandfather was like in big band jazz in Chicago and stuff. And he played like a couple different, different saxophones. Like I have his alto sax, which is like a really beautiful horn.
Yeah.
But it's got some weird knobs on it and stuff. Some of the old like sax teachers that I had back in the day, they were always marveled by like, wow, look at this weird old horn. But
I played sax in high school, so good. I like it.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, read instruments.
I love it. Yeah,
read instruments, so cool. Baby. Read instruments.
The best. Yeah.
So continue on. Yeah, the Police and the Doors. The Doors is like one of my it's top 3.
Yeah.
Punk rock. Give it to me.
So that was just like, this is like, first grade we're talking, so I'm getting all exposed to these weirdo kinds of music. And then, after sort of like going to the family dramas and the living on the streets and all that stuff, and we like settled down in Texas, and my older brother's like way into like the punk music, like Misfits, you know, I love the Misfits from there. Like I had like a DK shaved in the side of my head when I was in 7th grade, you know, for Dead Kennedys, you know, going to a Catholic school, rocking that shit. You know, like, so let's see, where corrosion of conformity that's popping into my mind, like just all sorts of like, being in Austin, you know, like the Butthole Surfers are a big deal for me, you know, huge, like love them. And actually that's a funny story, like, you know, in between, like after like my mom's now still in Austin, I'm back living with my dad, and my mom's trying to clean up her stuff or whatever, and she's sending me like care packages, and one of the times like, she sends me like the Butthole Surfers Rembrandt Pussy Horse, and my dad fucking opens the package before it gets to me. So then now he's holding up this tape and he's like, Rembrandt Pussy Horse, like what the hell is this? And I'm trying to like back up my mom and explain, I'm like, it's just music, you know, like what do you want, you know? But like, yeah, it's hard one to explain that one to your weirdo pops, you know.
And with that, we have come to the end of part 1 of our artist spotlight on Brian McGuire AKA Lefthouse. We are going to follow up with him on a part 2, 3, and 4. I'm sure part 5, as we had a long conversation. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. Remember, thekcbc.com. Find us on Facebook as well at Bitcoin Cryptocurrency Club. Thanks for listening.